This video tutorial is for mile marker 1, practice 1, questions 3 and 4, equations of perpendicular lines. In question 3 of the mile marker, we are asked to determine the slope of any line perpendicular to the line y equals 3/5 x minus 15. So a couple things we need to consider here. The first thing is that we need to be able to look at that equation and identify its slope. So if we take a look at that, we know that equation's in slope-intercept form, and m, the coefficient of x, is always going to represent the slope. So our slope of this line is 3/5. The other knowledge we need just comes down to how do perpendicular lines, how do their slopes relate to one another? So if we look at this example, we have two perpendicular lines here. One has a slope of +2, one has a slope of -1/2. And they both go through the origin, that's their y-intercept. So I could also call this 2x plus 0 and -1/2 x plus 0. That's why they have no b in their equation, because it's 0. So if we look at these, what we might notice is two different things about their slope. One is that those two slopes have opposite, that they have opposite signs. The other thing we might notice is that the absolute value of those slopes are what we call reciprocals of one another. So in math, when we're talking about reciprocal, we usually kind of think of a multiplicative relationship. And an example of two numbers that are reciprocals could be, for example, the number 4 and the decimal 0.25, which is the same as 1/4. We might also think, and more commonly think, of something like 2/3 and 3/2. So when we're talking about fractions, you notice that the numerator and denominators are essentially flipped when we talk about reciprocals. So all perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slope. The other thing we might notice about their slopes is that the product is -1. So if I go back to the example, the picture, +2 times -1/2 is going to be -1. All right, so that's a lot of information, but to go back to our original question, if I look in number 3, I notice that this has a positive slope here. So the first thing I know about this is that the slope is actually going to be negative for number 3, because if the one we're given is positive, the opposite sign is that it's negative. And then all I have to do is flip the numerator and denominator of the fraction. So -5/3, oops, that's supposed to be a 3, is our slope. All right, we're still going to use our slope from number 3 to help us answer question 4. So let's take a look at question 4. It asks us to determine the equation of the line that is perpendicular to the line y equals 3/5 x minus 15, and it goes through the point 15, -6. So again, we're going to use our knowledge about the slope-intercept form of the line, y equals mx plus b, where we can identify m as our slope and b as our y-intercept. Now, the only piece of information we don't know is what our y-intercept is going to be, because in number 3, we found our value of m. We found that our value of m was -5/3. So we can always rewrite that if that's helpful to us here. All right, so just like we did in problem number 2, if you watch that tutorial, we're going to use this point, and we're going to identify that 15 is an x value and 16 is a y value. So when we read this ordered pair, we have an x and a y value. We're going to use those in this equation. So let's just go ahead and keep the structure of this equation, but plug in what we know is going to be true. So we could use -6 for y equals m. We said m is going to be our slope, which is -5/3. And then x, we can use the number 15. and then we don't know our y-intercept. So that's essentially what we're solving for here. All right, so now if we just go through and do this multiplication, now you can use a calculator, but it's actually pretty easy to do in your head. We're multiplying a negative number with a positive number, so I know that their product is going to be negative, so I'm going to get a negative sign here. And then I might just think about it and say, all right, we're talking about thirds. Well, 1/3 of 15 is the number 5. So 5/3 of 15 is the same as 5 fives, and 5 times 5 is 25. So negative 5/3 times 15 is negative 25. And again, you can just use a calculator if you prefer. All right, we still don't know what b is, but we're one step closer. So now let's isolate our variable b by adding 25 to both sides. It's going to cancel on the left, or I shouldn't say cancel, it really becomes the number 0. And then on the right, and then on the left we have negative 6 plus 25. So negative 6 plus 25, that's the same as saying positive 25 minus 6, and that is going to be 19. So 19 is our value for b. Now that's not our final equation, but it's a really important piece of information. Going back again to the prompt, it says determine the equation of the line, not the y-intercept. So now we're going to write our equation using that y-intercept. So the easiest way is to just write it in slope-intercept form. y equals m, but this time we know our slope, so negative 5/3 x plus b. And we said our value of b is 19. And here it is written just a little more clearly. I'm having some trouble with my iPad stylus today, but there you go.